Hello and welcome to another episode of Secondhand Stories. This is a place where I tell you stories. What kind? Well, histories, mysteries, and unbelievistories. Now, before we start this week's episode, here are a bunch of quick announcements. Starting next week, I'm going to be on tour. If you happen to be in Rajasthan, Delhi, Thane, and Bangalore, this is for you. I'm coming to Rajasthan and Delhi alongside fellow beard haver, philosopher, and comedian Punit Pania. We're going to be doing shows in these places. On 16th March, we're in Jodhpur. On 17th March, we're in Ajmer. On 18th March, we're in Jaipur. And on 21st March, we're in Delhi. A lot of these places we're doing for the first time, so we're super excited. If you happen to be in these places, definitely drop by. Then Neville Shah and I are taking our friendship offline. We're doing shows on 27th March in Thane and 2nd and 3rd April in Bengaluru. So if you happen to be there, do get your tickets soon. All of these tickets are available in the description below. Do check it out and get your tickets soon because there are limited tickets. Okay, now all of that is done. Let's get to the story. This week's story is a mystery, and here's how it begins. A manager of a beverage outlet is watching a vlog. The vlog is on Haridwar, and as he watches it, he sits up straight because suddenly he has noticed a very familiar face. He's looking at a sadhu, but the face of the sadhu seems familiar. The face of the sadhu seems to belong to a far more sinister man. In the face of this sadhu, he sees the face of Kerala's most wanted man. He sees the face of a man called Sukumar Kurup. He immediately tips off the police, who begin a hunt for Kurup again. I say again because the police have been searching for this man for 38 years. They have gone to several states in India. They have gone to 13 countries. They have arrested hundreds of people who resemble Sukumar Kurup. But Kurup himself remains an enigma. This is the story of this criminal and the crime that shook Kerala. This is the story of Sukumar Kurup. Here's how the story begins. On 22nd January of 1984, it's the early morning hours. It's around 4 a.m. and a car is passing by a town called Kunnam. The car is passing by on a bridge. The driver of this car sees that in the paddy field, there is a car that is on fire. He immediately alerts the locals and the police are called. The police reach the scene and they see that an ambassador is on fire. Not just that, they find that in the driver's seat of this ambassador, there is a charred body. Now, the locals quickly identify this car as belonging to an NRI called Sukumar Kurup. They also believe that the body in the car is Sukumar Kurup. However, there is one person who is reserving his judgment. This person happens to be DSP Haridas. The reason DSP Haridas is reserving his judgment is because of the stuff he's found at the scene of the crime. What he's found are a pair of rubber gloves, an empty canister of petrol, and footprints that are fleeing this burning car. Something doesn't seem right to DSP Haridas. Now, who is Sukumar Kurup? Sukumar Kurup, as a young man, was an extremely restless person. He had a lot of energy and he had no way to channel it, which is why he had early on in his life decided to join the Indian Air Force. He joins the Air Force and quickly finds that life is extremely difficult in the Air Force. It's a tough life, he's not used to the discipline, and he decides that he wants to get out. Now, here's how he does it. He colludes with doctors and he fakes his own death. This works and he makes his way out of the Air Force. He then falls in love, marries a woman, and together they leave for the Gulf. They settle down in Abu Dhabi and he assumes the name Sukumar Kurup. Life is much better for Kurup in Abu Dhabi. He is making a lot of money, but he's also quick to spend it. In fact, he has taken up one major undertaking, which is that he is making a house for himself in Kerala. While the money was coming in, everything was happy and good. But in the 80s, the Gulf is hit by a recession. When this recession hits, money gets tight. Sukumar Kurup has not been in the habit of saving money, and there's also a major drain coming from this house that he's building in Kerala. And for these reasons, he finds himself in dire need of money. And that's how on 6th January 1984, he arrives from Abu Dhabi back to Kerala along with his office boy, Shahu. He had been in Kerala for a few days, and now his car is found in a paddy field on fire with a charred body inside. Here's where the first oddity of the case emerges. When forensic analysis is done, they find out that the body in the car hadn't been killed by the fire. The body in the car had been strangled and then had been placed in the car and set on fire. This was a murder masquerading as an accident. The police begin investigating the case and they call in Sukumar Kurup's brother-in-law. This man's name is Bhaskar Pillai. Now, here's how Bhaskar Pillai is related to Sukumar Kurup. He was Kurup's wife's sister's husband. He's called in and he gives a statement. Here's what Bhaskar Pillai says. He says that Sukumar Kurup had a lot of enemies in the UAE. And he fears that it's one of these enemies that has eventually killed Sukumar Kurup. The cops note this statement, but then DSP Haridas notices something odd. He sees that Bhaskar Pillai has come to the police station wearing a full-sleeved shirt, and he's got his sleeves buttoned up at the wrist. Now this is very odd because nobody else in the area seems to be wearing their shirt in that way. So he asks Bhaskar Pillai, he says, do you always wear your shirts with your sleeves buttoned up at the wrist? And he says, yes, I do. And that's when DSP Haridas says, well, roll them up. Bhaskar Pillai rolls up his sleeves, and that's when the police see that his hands are burnt. He's immediately taken in for questioning, and now he tells them a second story. Here's what he says. He confesses. He says that I was the one to kill Sukumar Kurup. Bhaskar Pillai says that Kurup had taken 50,000 rupees from him and he had promised him a job in UAE. But then he had cheated him of that money. In anger and to take revenge, Bhaskar Pillai had murdered Sukumar Kurup. The police take note of this and they arrest Bhaskar Pillai. Sukumar Kurup's family by now has heard of what has happened and they are anxious to get his body back for cremation. DSP Haridas, though, does not fully trust this admission that Bhaskar Pillai has made. So he tells the family that he is happy to hand the body over, but on one condition. He will give them the body if they promise not to cremate it. The family agree that they will bury the body. The body is handed over to them. And the burial takes place in the family compound. As the burial is taking place, relatives and friends have gathered. That's when Sukumar Kurup's driver, Punappan, arrives at the house. Here's how Punappan was connected to Sukumar Kurup. Sukumar Kurup had a second car. Now, this car he had converted into a tourist taxi cab, and the cab was driven by his driver Ponappan. Ponappan says that he had been out dropping passengers when he had heard the news, and hearing it, he had frantically driven back to the house. A relative at the house takes Ponappan aside and asks him to tell him what he knows. And that's when Ponappan says a very different story. Ponappan reveals that he had been driving along a road and he had happened to hit another car. When he got into this accident, a person had died. Now, instead of reporting this accident to the cops, Ponappan had decided to set the car and the driver on fire. Now, this was a very strange thing to do, because usually if there is an accident, then the driver merely flees. Doing something like this would only garner more attention. What's more, the forensic analysis had been thorough and not a single accident-related injury had been noted on the body. The cops do not believe Ponappan's version of events, but now they have been presented with two extremely different and contradictory versions of the truth. And DSP Haridas comes to the conclusion that both may be false. When the police hear this, they ask Ponappan, where is Sukumar Kurup? If you say that you have killed someone else in an accident, a stranger, then where is Kurup? And Ponappan tells them that he had dropped Sukumar Kurup off at a lodge in a place called Aluva. The cops decide that they're going to clear this up once and for all. They send policemen to this lodge in Aluva, and the policemen show the owner of the lodge a picture of Sukumar Kurup. The owner immediately recognizes the man. He says that he was right here and he's just left. In addition, there was a register where Kurup had written a false name. Though he had written a false name, the handwriting was absolutely true. The cops now know that Sukumar Kurup is alive, and they are faced with a second question. If Kurup is alive, then who is the man who had been killed in the car? With all this information, the cops decide to grill Bhaskar Pillai further. When they grill him again, and they grill him intensely, this time Bhaskar Pillai cracks and he starts divulging what actually happened. Here's what he tells them. He says that Sukumar Kurup had a prosperous life in Abu Dhabi and he made a lot of money, but he also spent a lot of money. He had started building a house in Kerala, and all of this was fine until the Gulf was hit by a recession. When the recession hit, Sukumar's savings, or the lack thereof, started taking a toll. In addition, funds were being drained by this house that he was building in Kerala. He needed money desperately. That's when Sukumar Kurup had hit upon a devious idea. He had decided to commit insurance fraud. He had taken out a life insurance policy on his life. This policy was worth 8 lakh rupees. Now here's what he was going to do. He was going to fake his own death. This had worked for him in the past, and he felt it could work for him again. He had quickly got 3 people in on this plan. The first was his office boy Shahu, then his brother-in-law Bhaskar Pillai, and his driver Ponappan. The 4 men had agreed to be part of this conspiracy. That's how he had landed in Kerala on 6 January 1984. He had arrived along with his office boy Shahu, and now they sought a body that resembled Sukumar Kurup in height and weight. Initially, the men thought that they could find such a body at the morgue. But they realized very quickly that if they took a body from the morgue, the deception would be found out pretty fast. So they had ditched that idea and decided to rob a grave. They reached out to a caretaker at a graveyard, but the man refused to join in on this criminal conspiracy. That's when the 4 men decided that they were going to look for a man who resembled Kurup and murder him. It was for this reason that the four men had been cruising in Kerala looking for a victim. They were driving in two cars. In one car was Ponappan, who was driving it, and Bhaskar Pillai and Shahu were at the back. In the second car was Sukumar Kurup. They had passed by a movie theatre, and there they found a man who was looking for a ride. Remarkably, he resembled Sukumar Kurup in height and weight. The men had given him a ride, and very quickly Bhaskar Pillai offered him alcohol. Alcohol was laced with a sedative. The man fell unconscious and he had been strangled to death. They then took him to a house and burnt his face so that he would not be recognizable. They had then driven the body to the field in Kunnam, placed him in the ambassador, and set the ambassador on fire. The police asked Bhaskar Pillai if he knew the identity of the man they had killed, and Bhaskar Pillai said they did not. The police then started searching through missing persons reports, hoping to find somebody who matched this description and had gone missing around the same time. And very quickly, they found a man who matched all these criteria. The report had been filed by the wife of a film representative called K.J. Chako. She said that Chako had left the house to watch a movie and he had not returned. His wife was expecting, and frantically she had been searching for days for her husband. Chako had the misfortune of being at that theatre and asking for a ride from his killers. With the case cracked, the police now begin rounding up their suspects. They very quickly arrest Bhaskar Pillai, Shahu and Ponappan. But Sukumar Kurup remains elusive. They always seem to be one step behind him. He had just left the lodge when they had arrived in Aluva, and now when they were looking for him afresh, he seemed to constantly be evading them. They learnt that he had fled to Bhutan. He stayed there for a while, but then when his money ran out, he returned back to Kerala. The cops get a tip-off, they rush to the location, and they find that he has just left again. This would be the pattern for the next few years. Rumors and false tips kept swirling. People said that he had fled to Bombay. Some said that he had fled the country. Others said that he had disguised himself as a monk. Some believed that he had died. He had a heart condition which he was getting treated, but eventually he had succumbed in the north of India. Tips kept flooding in, and for the next 38 years, the cops kept following up on them. They arrested hundreds of people across so many states and so many countries. But Sukumar Kurup remained at large. And now, a manager of a beverage outlet was watching a vlog. The vlog was about Haridwar. And in it, he had seen a face that resembled Sukumar Kurup. He had immediately informed the police. The question is it him? After all these years, is it really Kurup? Or is it just one more Kurup that has been conceived by a mind desperate to catch him? That's the irony of this case. That a man tried to fake his own death, but eventually gave life to countless versions of himself. Maybe this time it could be him, and maybe the cops will catch him, and hopefully that will put an end to the saga of greed and violence once and for all. So that is the story of Sukumar Kurup, the most wanted man in Kerala. So that's the story. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, then please leave a like and a comment. Definitely do those things because it helps this video reach a wider audience. This story has been covered extensively by a lot of people, most notably recently in a movie called Kurup, starring Dilkar Salman. So you can check that out as well. Like I said before, I'm going to be touring a lot in March. So if you happen to be in Rajasthan, specifically in Jodhpur on the 16th, Ajmer on the 17th, Jaipur on the 18th, and in Delhi on 21st March, definitely come by for the shows. Baba and I will be on tour on 27th March in Thane and 2nd and 3rd April in Bangalore. So you can get all of those tickets from the description. Ticket links are there. Do come by for them. They're going to be a lot of fun. So that's it from this week. I will see you at the shows. And until then, bye-bye.